it's just not worth it. And like I said, you can still do this and you're still going to be a good, loving parent. I'm just telling you, if you want to avoid a lot of nonsense, and this is not just regular coming of age stuff, right? This is not like, oh, you're trying to save your child from awkward experiences or slipping and falling. I'm saying if you want to give your child a leg up intellectually, spiritually, physically, emotionally, then hold off on that smartphone as long as possible or don't even do it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gospel Tech Podcast. My name is Nathan Sutherland, and today we get the opportunity to speak with Dina Alexander, the founder of Educate and Empower Kids, whose entire life work right now is trying to inform and educate young people and parents on topics like smartphones and the internet and digital citizenship and how can we process the conversation of pornography. I'm really excited for her because, as you heard in the introduction, she is very passionate. She's well informed on the subject, and she has a lot of great challenges for us as parents, for us to think about so that we can intentionally love our kids out of hope, not out of fear, and take seriously that opportunity we have for accountability and not just simply controlling our children's choices, but really looking at what does it look like to love them well, to allow them agency and free will, but then to also equip them and empower them to make good choices. So with that in mind, we're going to get this conversation started. Welcome to the Gospel Tech Podcast, a resource for parents who are feeling outpaced and overwhelmed as they raise children in a tech world. As an educator, parent, and tech user, I want to equip parents with the tools, resources, and confidence they need to raise kids who love God and use tech. Hi, everyone, and welcome. Today, we get a chance to speak with Dina Alexander, the founder of Educate and Empower Kids. Welcome, Dina. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to talk to you today a little bit about your work, about how you're helping families be good digital citizens and parents be excellent resources for their kids. Could you just walk us through a little bit of what inspired you to begin this work with Educate and Empower Kids?
So probably about 7 years ago, a little more than 7 years ago, I was just reading a simple Facebook article, back when we could get useful information on Facebook. And
I remember.
Many moons ago. And I read an article about teen porn consumption, and I couldn't believe it. I honestly was reading through this article thinking, this can't be true. It cannot be this bad. And so I started researching the people that they were quoting, the PhDs, one person being Dr. Gail Dines, who's basically the foremost researcher on pornography in the world. Started researching some of her articles, and it was just all within one afternoon. Just sitting, I'm a full-time mom, and I was shocked, and it just was basically that same day, like a fire inside me, where I just said to myself, I have to do something about this. I have to warn my kids. I have to talk to my friends about this and anyone else who will listen to me. And did a lot of thinking, a lot of praying, reached out to a lot of experts, researching, reading tons. And because at first I was just going to create some family home evening lessons and put them on Pinterest and pat myself on the back. And I realized that's not enough. I have to just get to every parent I can. And that same day, my kids came home from school, and I said, "You will not. Hey, I just read some stuff, kids, and
kids.
We gotta talk."
Yeah.
And so I'm definitely a person of action. And so just from that moment on, I started gathering a board together, and that's how we started.
So that was it. Like, you were reading on social media, did the deep dive, and started making phone calls.
Yeah, pretty much. Told my husband, I want to do something about this, and let's see what we can do. And I just realized there wasn't really any resources for parents. There was stuff for addicts, for male addicts at that time. And there was a lot of very shaming resources out there,
Sure.
anything Christian related was seriously some scary stuff out there. Like, you'd go to the website and it was literally a bleeding heart Jesus, and like, just it was just so weird, like this stuff out there. This is, 2012, 2013. And I just said, I can do better than this.
Yeah.
And so because I started talking to a lot of parents, and I realized, oh, it wasn't just my Christian friends who were freaked out about talking to their kids about porn or sex. It was my atheist friends, my non-religious friends. I mean, every parent was freaked out, and oftentimes they still are if they don't know where to turn.
Yeah. Yeah. So it started off with this passion that you had for seeing families and for young people be educated and empowered to address pornography. How did you go from I am passionate to like, this is our action step? You have a board, you started clearly the foundation and the group, but.
So that's a great question. Because I was realizing as I would talk to parents at church, I mean, I was even talking to people at the gym. I'm on the elliptical. I'm talking to the person next to me. I mean, I was realizing I can't even get these parents to talk to their kids about sex, let alone pornography, especially when I started telling them what was in pornography. Then it was like, these people were even more freaked out. So I realized, okay, we got to go back a step and meet parents where they're at. So that's why our first set of books was the 30 Days of Sex Talks for ages 3 to 7, 8 to 11, and 12 plus, right? Yeah. Very basic stuff in there. And of course, people said, 3 to 7, are you kidding? And then I would show them and taught them, this is almost all protective information.
Sure. About protecting your body, yourself.
Yes,
being
exactly.
Created with a purpose and
yes,
knowing that
exactly. My body belongs to me. These are the difference between friendships and romantic relationships. Respect, just very basic building blocks for healthy relationships in the future. Sure. So that was where it started. And we were basically we still are the only sex education books out there that have a background in fighting pornography. Do you know what I mean? Anything that has been produced since is very much of the quote unquote, sex positive, which that's a very mixed statement, because I definitely believe in being sex positive and making it very positive, and that teaching my kids that sex is awesome and amazing and wonderful. Yeah. But of course, the other end of that and the sex positive is everything is okay. Right. There are no limits. You can have sex with as many people as you want, whatever gender you want, anytime you want, with any number of partners at the same time. This kind of thing of everything is okay.
Yeah, it's just a giant web. Yes. And you're like, whoa. Like, all right, let's kind of getting out of hand there.
Exactly. Because sex positive started out with, let's teach sex from a positive point of view, which
not scar people that sex is bad.
Which what parent doesn't agree with now. But of course, it goes all the way to the other end of that, because I remember I went to a sex ed conference that was put on by Planned Parenthood of the Northeast. It was out in New Jersey, went out there. And I remember I was, selling and giving sex talks books to different sex educators. And I did have one person come up to me and say, because there's one section in the 12 plus called monogamy versus hookup sex. There's one little section chapter on that.
Sure.
And I remember this woman, an educator from New York City. This is kind of, I'm not sure what to do with this book or this section, because you're going to make kids feel bad who are polyamorous, meaning that they have more than one partner. And I just thought, yep, exactly. We are on another planet, you and I. And I just remember saying, that to me is not, that's a choice. That is not something you're born with, say, like as a sexual identity. You're not born needing multiple sex partners. Right. But again, that's
an interesting way to think about that. Sure.
That's what people, I think parents, again, don't even realize what they're up against out there in the sex ed world, let's say. So, but anyway, so that's kind of just a very different. That's where we started, was in just this, learning and just seeing the whole continuum. Because again, I think especially in Christian culture, you think that, or in any culture, you think that people think the same way you do.
Right.
They don't, and so that's where we have to kind of explore it so that we know the full picture. I'm not saying you're going to tell your kids every single terrible thing you learned, but we as parents need to know the different viewpoints out there to kind of know what we're up against so that we can have those discussions to combat that, so that we can say, okay, pornography is teaching this very counterfeit version of sex. Let me tell you what real love, intimacy, and a beautiful relationship, a beautiful sexual relationship can and should be.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so powerful. Right. And kids, I guess, love to hear that they're being treated like with respect. Like it's not, I always use the example of the movie Mean Girls, where the PE teacher is trying to teach sex. Like, don't have sex. You will get pregnant and you will die. Right. Like
Yeah.
and so often, like that's how the conversation comes across, right? Like
Yeah.
often we as adults are saying, hey, we've made mistakes. We've seen the harm this stuff causes. Like, don't go down this road, like save yourselves. And what kids hear is like, I'm a stickler and I don't understand you, so don't do the cool stuff. And I love just that idea of like really equipping, empowering parents. It's something Anna and I are super passionate about. And that's why we're excited to be speaking with you today.
But you bring up a great point there, because that's why it can't just be one conversation,
right?
Because your kids are going to might hear that negative, right? You might say one negative thing out of 10 in talking about sex, right? You might mention unwanted pregnancy, but then you also might mention how it brings you closer together, how it's this beautiful expression of your love. You might be bringing all these things and they might hear that one. And that's why, again, we have to have multiple conversations. So thank you for mentioning that point.
Well, and so listeners, let's just be very clear. What we're not saying is that we have some kind of antidote that if you just, vaccine your kid with this conversation once, like, great, we just, porn proofed and sex proofed your kids and they're going to grow up and be amazing and perfect. That's not what we're saying. We're saying your kids aren't perfect. It's why they need Jesus. and, and that's why we're having this conversation, is extending that love for them and that preemptive grace of knowing they very well might make a mistake. And this specifically, we're starting here with the pornography area, but in one of these areas of just digital interest and digital access that they've got. And we want to make sure that you as the parents are there, because while Dina or myself might be able to talk to your kid at a conference or something, it's way more effective to get that continual right to be heard kind of parental relationship. So that's awesome.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you saying that. Because I don't believe that there is some sort of inoculation or that you can porn proof your kid. There really is no such thing, because we all have this wonderful thing called agency and choices. Yeah. And with everything that's, my kids, 2 of my 3 kids were exposed not of their own free will, but by somebody showing them something, right? So our kids are going to be exposed, and our kids are, there's so many layers to this, and they live a lifetime. Our kids are not going to be exposed once or twice or 5 times. It's going to be hundreds of times throughout their life that they're going to be exposed, or maybe thousands, that they're going to be exposed to hypersexualized media or porn. And so that's why, again, it's that continuing conversation. And like you said, that's why we need grace to make it through not just their childhoods, but their whole lives, right?
So, and then make their marriages like it's not going to go away. Like it's going to be an ongoing, how do we love well? So then, pornography was where you started, and then you've extended into, I used the word I think already once, but the phrase digital citizenship. Can you like break that out for us? Because I think that's one of those like catchwords you hear, especially as a former educator. We heard that all the time. And I think it's one of those things we sometimes nod with, but we don't exactly know what we mean when we hear that. So can you explain, what do you mean when you're doing digital citizenship?
That's a great question. So we're all digital citizens just by nature of all of us being online these days. It's a rare time that we actually meet somebody. Like I have an aunt who doesn't have a smartphone and doesn't have internet in her house. She's the only person I know out of the thousands of people that I know, right? But by virtue of being online, we are digital citizens with our kids using Google Classroom, watching YouTube videos for Spanish class or history class. They are engaging not even just with the kids in their class, but with people all over the world, in watching, in playing video games, in interacting on social media, etc. And so we are always trying to help parents and kids teach their kids how to become positive, good digital citizens. And a lot of educators are as well, thank goodness, because this is something that is very difficult for parents to do on their own. But that means that we are going to do our best and be our best selves online. So in all of our interactions, that we are going to be kind, that we are going to be thoughtful, that we're going to post things that are well researched and that make sense, that are not just reactionary, let's say. And most importantly, I think, is that helping our kids realize that every action they take has a reaction. We call it the ripple effect. It's like dropping a rock into a pond. There's ripples. So every email you send, every text you send, every photo you send can have a positive or a negative impact on another human being, on your life, on maybe even hundreds, maybe even thousands or millions of people. That to me is the first piece of digital citizenship, is understanding that at our fingertips, with just the click of one button, with pressing send, think of that's not even a second's worth of behavior, can affect the rest of your life. And that's just something that is so huge and so daunting, but that we have got to help our kids understand, because they can literally ruin their careers, ruin their reputation, and be sent to jail by sending the wrong thing one time, and so that's why it is so important that they understand their power, and that doesn't have to be just a terrifying, scary conversation, but understanding that they have a huge power when they are online, interacting with classmates, interacting with their teacher, reaching out to an expert on Twitter, gossiping on social media, whatever, that this is a huge worldwide community that we are involved in.
Yeah. And so parents and listeners, I just want to kind of break in here. You might be feeling overwhelmed by the fire hose you just got hit with, because we started with like pornography. That's a huge conversation. And then we went into, and everything else online. I guess my hope in you listening to this and in talking to Dina today and kind of tapping into some of her expertise in this area is simply to open that conversation in our own minds, where we might have gone, well, like I'm most worried about pornography. So I'm going to we're going to address that really well. And then we're going to kind of hope that everything else works out. And I guess taking off the should, right? We don't want to should on ourselves. Well, I should have all these conversations. We got to kind of do them tomorrow, and we got to do them really intensely. Really bringing this back to, man, what does it look like to extend who you are, right? The reason we're called Gospel Tech is this idea that we extend our identity from the gospel, that we are saved by grace. And so that should look like something. This is what James is talking about in James 2:17, where it's talking like our faith should extend into what we do, which means what we post, which means where we go online, which means when we make a mistake, how we handle that mistake. It's not, we're never going to make mistakes. It's how do we handle these situations in love? And how do we help our kids do that? And it can sound sometimes like, man, people are just really scared of the internet and we just don't get it. I'll share a couple examples. Maybe 2 years ago, my last year of teaching, I was walking out front, and a kid who was going into his senior year walked up and was like, "Hey, Sutherland, I want to tell you a story." I was like, okay. And this young man goes, "Well, I was getting some pictures from a former girlfriend. We were exchanging sexting images. And I forwarded it on to a buddy." He's like, "I know that was the wrong thing to do, but this is what I did." Well, through a series of events, police get involved. He was 17 at the time, which is the only thing that gave him any kind of hope in this situation. But he ends up getting nailed on basically sexual harassment and then proliferation of pornographic images. He does not get nailed for child pornography because he wasn't 18 yet, which he would have. But it did go felony. His goal was to join the military. He now can't do that. For at least the career he wanted. There's opportunities in the future, but he was going into a senior year knowing that his childhood dreams were dead, all because he thought it'd be funny to pass this picture on to a buddy. And that buddy posted it on the internet, and that girl got bullied from it. And now, clearly there's a number of things that went wrong. But parents, when we talk about this is a young man who had big hopes and dreams and knew the right decision enough to come tell me about it, right? Like he wasn't hiding under a rock. He was owning it and saying, "This was a mistake. I did the wrong thing." And then he said, "Please tell people about that." He said I could use his name. I don't want to use his name. But parents, be aware that even those kids that we'd put in quotations as good kids, right? do stupid things because their orbital prefrontal cortex is not there to inhibit their decision making sometimes. And some of those really snap decisions, man, they can end up with a felony on your record and a loss of your dream job and any number. And yeah, that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah. And I do tend to, and I appreciate you mentioning that. I do tend to fire hose people with information, but all of this can be broken down into very simple things.
Yes.
That is always my goal in doing a podcast or speaking at a conference or a church group, is to help parents know this is very doable. Having these conversations, when you talk about pornography, when you talk about cell phone use and social media use, all of these things can be broken down into small, simple chats. Even something as scary as talking about sending nudes or being, the effects of that can be done in a small conversation. It's not something that you have to plan for days and weeks, that these are, small, simple things that you can do over dinner. And there's a reason. We are the right parents for these kids. We absolutely have the confidence of the Lord that we are the right people to handle these situations.
Yeah. So parents, be encouraged in that. And there are some amazing resources, which actually we'll do something either in the notes or a later post, but we're going to be talking about actually getting listeners some of these wonderful resources from Educate Empower Kids into your hands. And so look for those. We'll be posting on those. But you mentioned just kind of in passing, so I'm going to return to it here. I want to kind of do our first little bit of a deep dive, because that was our 10,000 foot. What have you been up to? Right, like that was the big fire. But I want to kind of focus in, because you mentioned smartphones, social media, and one of the questions I get a lot, and Anna gets a lot, is should I get my kid a smartphone? So I just want to hear kind of from you. Have years of experience now. You've been doing the research. What is your kind of first answer when a parent goes, hey, should I get my kid a smartphone?
So I have a now 20-year-old, 17-year-old, and 14-year-old. And so when I first started this, it wasn't as big of a thing. I don't even think we weren't even on Instagram yet. Right.
Yeah, I think Instagram is like 6 years old.
Yeah. So that's when my daughter was in about the 8th grade or so, somewhere in there. And we had heard of the wait until 8th movement. Wait until your kid is at least in the 8th grade to give your child a smartphone. So we gave that child a smartphone at that age. We immediately knew within a few months, this was probably not a great choice. Okay. So we upped our different filtering, monitoring, etc. I'll talk about that in a second. Yeah. And then with our next child, we waited until he was in 9th grade, right? We're like, okay. And what I was seeing from parents all over the country, because the research was so mixed at that time of the effects. There was no depression research on it yet, but I'm watching and seeing what my daughter and her friends are going through. And it was, I didn't need research to tell me that this was very bad for their health. Yeah. And that was just basically Facebook at that time. And then some kids were on Twitter. And then, yes, that is when the Instagram kind of really exploded for a lot of kids. And we're watching the bullying starting. There was online bullying going on, or just meanness. Yeah. And so we're watching this. And again, now the research starts coming in showing how bad it is. There was a great book a few years ago called, I don't know if it's The Secret Lives of Teenage Girls. The author is Nancy Jo Sales. And I highly recommend that book, not just to parents, but any young woman, young men's leader, because it is a great insight into the psyche of teenage.
It's troubling. So parents, if you're going to look that up, it is not something to read before bed. It is not something just to hand your teenager. There's some dark stuff and some just, very real conversations had.
But you're also understanding what the quote unquote good kids are going through, because I'm seeing this, at that point we moved to Texas. My daughter is in high school there, and it all started to make sense. Click, click, click of why this meanness was going on and what our kids were up against. So in seeing that, and then my son, again, we gave him a smartphone in the 9th grade.
Yeah.
And we're watching him and watching our daughter and her addiction. What we're seeing, because it wasn't so much as much of an interest in pornography as it was in social media. So it was this huge time waster. And then I'm watching my son and the texting. And we actually printed out for him because 1 month we had a very special surprise in that he had sent over 10,000 texts. And so we printed out the bill for him that was about not the bill, excuse me, the number. We printed out the texts, and it was about 5 inches thick worth of paper of this is how many texts he had sent. And then the gaming, the YouTube, just a ridiculous time waster. And so I am a parent, of course, that has been very intentional with. So I'm saying this as somebody who has been in the field, been researching this, doing this for years, watching the research, and my kids were out of control, basically.
Right.
So when my son was in 11th grade, we gave him a wonderful surprise and took his smartphone away and gave him a dumb phone. Okay.
Oh, wow. Like flip phone or like what'd you give him?
No, we used Gab Wireless.
Okay. Yeah.
And there is another one that I can't remember the name of it, but it's an article on our website right now about kid-friendly alternatives to smartphones. Okay. So that was obviously a huge.
The punked phone is another one. And the light phone. Okay.
Light phone's a good one. So, but it was a huge adjustment. I mean, it threw him for a total loop. And it was not pleasant in our home.
I was gonna say, dig into that, because for parents who are listening, so the podcast directly before this one addresses kind of, all right, I gave my kid a smartphone already. What do I do now? Like, I understand that we're kind of in water over our heads. So you actually, you said he was in a junior in high school?
A junior.
And you revoked his phone.
Yes. And gave him.
Walk us through, I mean, just a little bit. You don't have to spend a ton of time, but
but it's about, and just to be for parents, it's about being gutsy and being brave and realizing that you're the parent and that your kid is worth it. Yeah. And so if you have those, because I've heard every excuse in the world as to why their kid needs a smartphone. All the way to me, the most heart-wrenching was, well, my 8-year-old daughter has diabetes and this phone, there's an app that helps her keep control of her blood sugar, blah, blah, blah. Guess what? My husband's a doctor. There are a lot of other ways and a lot of other things to help a child keep, and just like people our age when they were kids and kept track of their blood sugar, that the damage a smartphone will do to your child is so beyond anything that there is. So I'm trying to not go off on a tangent on this of how utterly destructive smartphones are for kids. Okay. Now they are amazing tools. And I love having a smartphone. I like being able to, at my fingertips, reach out to an expert on Twitter from across the world and have them get back to me in 20 minutes. That is amazing. Right. But this is such an adult tool in that, like you said, that frontal lobe is not myelinated and they are totally ill-equipped to handle it. Now, my next child is a 14-year-old who has a flip phone. Okay. He's had a flip phone since 7th grade. Okay. And it is now, so now we have, I'm looking at the mistakes we made with the other 2 kids, and I have good kids, right? Young Women Medallion, Eagle Scout projects for both my kids.
By 14?
Yes. Oh, by 13, because we had to finish it before the church finished, right? So my kids are good kids, right? They've done sports, service, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Sure. Whatever you want to pat yourself on the back for. And this is way too much for them to deal with. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. My daughter, has talked about like how hard it was, but also now what a blessing it was that we had so many restrictions. Okay. My 17-year-old, like I said, it was very difficult that when we took it away, when we let him know, we did not warn him. So parents, don't warn your kids when you take that smartphone, if you're gutsy enough, if you're brave enough to do that with your kids.
Just the nuclear option.
Yeah. I mean, it was
they come home and you're like, phone on the counter.
Yeah. We were like, I know. Well, I'm kind of a goofball. So it was like, honey, I won't say the name. We have a surprise for you.
Well,
You
this is
know,
actually how the conversation went.
that's how it went.
Okay.
I have a surprise for you.
Okay.
And we took his phone and we said, we have this other phone for you. And it looks like a smartphone, but it's so not, right? A
Yeah.
Gab Wireless has talk, text, a radio, and a terrible camera on it. And you cannot receive photos and you cannot send photos, right?
Okay. All
You
right.
can,
I was wondering that when you said text, I was
yes.
like, that seems like a loophole, but
Yeah. And you can't even be on a group text, right?
okay.
So you can only text an individual. Anywho. And he just like, he was silent. Like you could tell he was just in shock that this was going on.
Yeah.
And he didn't, he just kind of like, he kind of simmered on it for a
Okay.
couple weeks. You could tell just like, so there wasn't any kind of like flip out with him.
Okay.
But it was, it was difficult. He was angry. He was very angry that we were doing that. But it was such a time suck. It was such a time suck for our kids that they can literally sit there and watch YouTube for hours,
Yes.
watch gamers, watch whatever streamers.
Yep.
And so, that was a difficult thing but then I also felt lots of guilt because I was like, that was my mistake in giving them and I should have known better, but also we learned a lot. And then now, so our 14-year-old, I let him know that he will not be getting a smartphone at all
Like while he's in your home,
while he is in our
not getting a
home.
smartphone. Okay.
Or actually we go back and forth, but we're like, maybe the last 6 months he's living with us. Okay. Because I am a believer in having your kids make mistakes while they are still living with you. Okay. So that they can learn, they can make their mistakes with saying something stupid, but he does text, right? He has friends that he texts, but that's, you kind of, I think you need to help them experience that so they don't make those mistakes, like commit a felony by sending child porn when they're out in college, right?
Those things.
So you want to have that, but that's probably the max I would do. Now, this is also, again, I'm seeing years and years of damage because there's, of course, parents out there listening right now saying, oh, not my child, or I will have this. We have what's called Circle at our house. That's the filtering system that we use, which is
attaches to your Wi-Fi, the Circle with Disney product.
Absolutely. Okay. And then they also have what's called Circle Go, which is for so for phones that are going out. Okay. Like I said, I have 3 very good kids. Yeah. The 2 older ones who've had smartphones, guess what? They know every way to get around Circle Go.
Right.
Okay. And so do your kids. Please stop thinking your kids are some sort of angelic person. They are going to be shown porn. They are going to be shown other inappropriate things, and they are not going to be able to withstand the temptation of just the absolute time suck that social media and YouTube and anything else on their phones, their games. Okay. Yeah. This is a very adult tool. And I'm probably pretty in that I have a digital citizen tech background. Sure. In this movement, and that I am telling you to keep smartphones away from your kids as much as possible. Okay. Now, because the popular digital citizenship movement is, just do this. Everything's going to be fine. It's kind of like the sex positive movement. Oh, everything is fine and beautiful and wonderful. Oh, your kids will do this and da 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 da. Right. And I do believe in using tech for good and that we can teach our kids that. But it has to be under such a narrow, controlled environment that most of us don't have time to be sitting next to our kid every single time they are on their phone. Right. And so if you're not willing to take those huge, amounts of responsibility of, say, keeping the smartphone in your possession until your child comes home from school and then sitting next to them for the 30 minutes while they're on social media and then handing it back to you. Right. Then don't do it. Do you know what I mean? Because it is, and I know this is hard, this is going against normative parenting. Right now, the norm to be a quote unquote good parent is to give your kid a smartphone so you know where they're at. And so they can call you in an emergency, whatever little things that we tell ourselves, sure. Right? The things that I told myself. Yeah.
access
Oh,
those things.
yes. Oh,
They're going to get left behind.
yeah, I don't want my kid to not be part of the group when all of their friends
Yes.
are on Instagram. I mean, I definitely got that pressure.
A
You know, my
lot.
son, everybody else, because I had let my daughter on social media, but I wasn't letting my son as a freshman and sophomore. I did not let him on social media at all. Right. So I'm hearing from, him on that. It did not affect his social life whatsoever.
Okay, let's
I,
stop that because this is one of the big ones I'll get. It's all right. So far we've heard when should a kid or should a kid get a smartphone? Because we get that question a lot. You said basically no, up to
hold
maybe
hold off as long as you
as
can.
long as you
Okay.
physically can.
Yes,
And
senior year,
okay,
if you must, please be brave, be better than the other parents in your neighborhood and in your ward, and love your as my kids when they would complain about stuff, I would say, I guess I just love you more than those parents.
sure. Well,
And they would
yeah.
because I was willing to make the hard choices that other
Right.
parents weren't.
So then I want to run through then. All right. So we talked about what happened when you took the phone from a junior, but when you get that pushback of parents maybe telling you like, oh, well, that's great for you and your family, but for my kids, it wouldn't work. Or, I mean, I did a talk at a church recently. And one of the major questions was, hey, all of Johnny's friends are on social media. If he steps back from social media, like we see the negative impacts, that was kind of the frame of the question was, we see that this is impacting him. He's losing sleep. He's losing some emotional focus. He's losing some, academic, what we say, momentum. But these are also his friends. He's known since elementary school. If he leaves this group, that's the only way they communicate. Johnny is going to lose all social contact. We're really worried about social isolation, et cetera. What do you say to parents? I mean, with a 14-year-old, I would assume this is something you're currently addressing.
I
That's kind of
I
the
would I would say that is absolute garbage. And yes, your child is going to put that pressure on you, but again, your child's mental health is more important than doing what all the other mommies and daddies are doing. Okay. My son, again, so never on social media. They still have a great social life and do just fine not being on social media. And so will your kid too. Okay. Them building that resiliency, learning how to pick up the phone and dial and call a friend, maybe from your phone or your landline and say, hey, do you want to hang out?
okay.
These simple skills are more important than getting on a group text and a group DM on Instagram and being like, hey, what are you doing? Oh, here's a meme. Oh, here's another meme for you. Right? I know what they do and I know what they talk about, okay? Because I'm watching what my kids are doing inside and out, right? Your kids will not miss anything. And every kid will tell you, everybody else is on. I'm the only kid in the class. Well, believe me, every single one of my kids, I have found other parents who they did not let their kids be on social media or have the smartphone. Okay. So that is just a wonderful lie that your children will tell you. And I know that's hard to believe from your little angel. Please don't think you or your family is immune. And it's like you can ignore everything I say right now and still be a good parent. You can give your kid a smartphone, still be a good parent, but you are going to have much more heartache. Your child is going to have far more psychological repercussions. What I have told them and what I firmly believe is I'm giving you a leg up. You are going to do better in college and in any job you have because you know how to hold your attention span and because you don't need to click over to a game every few minutes. You can actually finish a task. You can finish a book.
And
Okay.
and to emphasize that with parents around, right? Like one of these kind of great, kind of what you hear the tech evangelists spreading is, well, we need tech because if you don't have it, you're going to be behind. And I would just, parents, let's just call that out for what it is. Like, that's not true. My 18-month child knows how to like zoom in on a photo, swipe through photos, knows what app, right? Like just
Exactly.
from seeing me use a phone, like she can go on there, find the pictures and start like swiping through stuff. So this technology, unless you're talking about my child needs to learn how to code, right? And so, Dina, the conversation we normally have on this podcast is we break tech into two categories. We have drool tech, which is the tech we consume, and tool tech, the tech we use to build, right? And really what we've been talking about here is that smartphones, while they have tool tech aspects, are so powerful in their drool tech, their distraction, the consumption, that it's not really worth the trade-off. That
It really
yes,
isn't.
right? It's steroids. Like steroids make, okay, this is a bad analogy, but as the one that popped in my head, but like there is a benefit to taking a steroid. Like, great, you're going to get stronger. The downsides is what we're concerned about, as in so many things in life. And anyway, let's get beyond
Yeah, no,
my bad
yeah,
analogy.
no,
But
no, that I no, I think, but that's actually a great analogy. You have this tiny benefit of your kid fitting in or being able to talk to people on social media that's, maybe the size of a walnut, but then they have the psychological baggage the size of an SUV. It's just not worth it. And like I said, you can still do this and you're still going to be a good, loving parent. I'm just telling you, if you want to avoid a lot of nonsense. And this is not just regular coming of age stuff, right? This is not like, oh, you're trying to save your child from awkward experiences or slipping and falling. I'm saying if you want to give your child a leg up intellectually, spiritually, physically, emotionally, then hold off on that smartphone as long as possible or don't even do it. Okay, because it's the damage is incalculable because we don't even have the technology to measure the damage. Do you know
yeah,
what I mean? We don't
yeah,
even have that long-term research yet of what it is, and with social media particularly, you can't filter it. You cannot filter social media on with any system that we have now. That is where kids are almost always seeing porn, seeing videos on how to starve yourself, how to cut yourself, to how to perform self-harm, people having their suicide diaries, whatever. There is so much of that on social media. Again, you can do it. You can ignore anything I say. And the grace of Jesus Christ will still take hold in your life and help you. You're still, but I'm saying in the good, better, best, it's not better or best.
yeah.
No.
So
And
then
your kids are worth more.
let's
So.
follow that directly. All right. So like we have probably properly freaked out a number of parents, which is fine, right? Like fear isn't all bad. It's when it turns to shame and it overwhelms us and we get that second person voice, right? Like it goes from, man, I've made mistakes to you are dumb and you've made mistakes and you are right. Like soon as it gets that accusing, like we want to, listeners, we want to footnote that voice whenever it shows up. It is odd that we go, I made a mistake. And then all of a sudden the second, like who's talking at that point? There is an accuser, and we do want to remember that. So let's talk practical. When we talk some boundaries, obviously we could go deep dive. Let's just go top three. Like, what are three things you would say you've got kids age kind of 6 to 16? What are three things parents need to employ to take some reestablished tech boundaries?
Yeah, just simple start is to have tech-free zones in your home,
Okay.
meaning that there are not going to be any technology at the dinner table. That is a tech-free zone. When you are at church, perhaps you want your kids to bring their paper scriptures and not be on their phone scriptures. That's up to
Parents,
you.
that's for you too. That's for you. We
Yeah,
don't model this one, okay?
and for you
Raising
too.
our kids.
But again, so pick those tech-free zones, but also having tech breaks. And we find that that's easiest to do on the weekend. Maybe you can't, because of work, take a full week off of social media, but your family and you can take a break for a weekend. And I'm sure most parents have had experiences where they've had to take their child's phone away as a punishment for a day, a week, or whatever. You'll notice that your child functioned just fine without it somehow. But that again, so maybe every weekend, maybe one weekend a month when you are fasting from food, you're going to fast from technology as well, which might be tough because again, coping mechanisms. So do your best there. But having those are two of my top three. And then number three, I would say you need to have a reliable filtering and monitoring system. Like I said, we use Circle and Circle Go. I'm sure there are other really great ones out there. We also have within our security system, we have, Vivint, right? We have a camera that faces the back door, but it also magically, my husband can turn that on and see if somebody is on the computer. Or
assuming it's like a desktop, like you have a public
desktop. Computer. Yes, we have so yeah, that's 101 parents. If your kids have a laptop in their room, it should be in a public area.
Red flashing lights and sirens, which is something we talk about both for sleep, for safety, for
absolutely. So we have it our security camera that's inside our house, it happens to so it's looking at the back door. So I have one child we're online school is at the dinner table right there on his laptop, and we have the other kid but anyways, we can see both computers.
Sure. And then that accountability, which actually, listeners, there's been a previous one where we talked about the difference between accountability and control, and how do we lovingly step
Yes.
into that world with our kids and not just make the decisions for them, but
Yeah.
be in the sticky muck and mire of this tech that we're allowing them to engage. So being present in that. So that's awesome. If there was another hour, we could dive deep into bullies and body issue and more about pornography. But you have resources for this. So where can people go if they're like, wow, you guys didn't even get to that, like that one thing my family's dealing with? Where can they go to find out some more information?
Yes. I was not planning on going crazy on smartphones,
Well,
but
it's great. Hey,
but this is
it's
the
relevant.
experience. This is the experience of my family right now.
Yeah.
So we are at educateempowerkids.org. All of our books are on Amazon. So we have How to Talk to Your Kids About Pornography, and our latest book is called Conversations with My Kids: 30 Essential Family Discussions for the Digital Age. And within that, we do talk about social media, changing technology, but we also have other discussions that are more personal, like talking about overcoming fears, creating a budget. Most of these are conversations that our parents never had to have with us. And we are on Instagram and Facebook, Edu Empower Kids. And we have on our website, we have tons of free resources. We have a lessons page. There's one on using tech for good. There's a couple on talking about pornography. There's ones about social media. They're built for the digital age. So there's
That's awesome.
it's all
Okay.
free.
Okay. So again, let's just repeat that website. It is educateempowerkids.org, or the social media handle was edukids.
Edu Empower Kids.
Yeah. Edu Empower Kids. All right. EDU Empower Kids. So you guys can go there and look it up. So Dina, thank you so much for your time and for being a part of this conversation as we work together to try to love God and use tech.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Parents, I hope that this was an encouraging conversation for you. I hope that in this process you heard Dina and myself talking about the very real hope there is in Christ and what we can do about that, right? There is faith and action we can take to help our kids manage their technology, to see where they are and are not healthy, and to model that in our own lives. This isn't about having your tech life buttoned down and being perfect. Instead, it's about acknowledging that you're not, about having the hard conversations with your kid, because tech for them is not the same as tech for you. They're swimming in it. They're awash in it. They're getting told a lot of lies about who they are based on their technology, and they're hearing and feeling a lot of lies coming through their social media, through their games, through their shows, through the interactions they have with people online. And it's our spot as parents not to just put up a wall and keep the evil out, but to help them digest what is happening, help them break that down in light of the gospel. These people that are causing problems online are people that Jesus died for too. So I hope that this was encouraging in that and not just overwhelming. If you have questions, reach out to me, nathan@flintandiron.org. You can also reach out on social media. On Facebook, we're at Sparking Purpose. And on Instagram, we are at Flint and Iron. And I hope that, again, that this was encouraging, that it was helpful, and that you will continue to join us for these conversations as we work together to love God and use tech.